LegalizeFreedom.com. Why are we here? Where do we come from? Where are we going? From the nature of reality to the future of humanity. Beyond politics, poverty and war. LegalizeFreedom.com.
Greetings and welcome once again to LegalizeFreedom.com. Why are we here? Where do we come from? Where are we going? These are the eternal questions which have forever faced mankind and to which we still do not have answers. And that, my friends, is what this is all about. I'm your host, Greg Moffat, and my guest today is Helen Sewell. Helen is a fully qualified professional astrologer with 25 years experience. She first became interested in astrology through reading books on the sun signs when she was a teenager, and it was then that she realised there was a definite correlation between what she read and the characteristics she could recognise in the people she knew. As her astrological reading broadened, Liz Greene became her favourite author, and she then decided to take the opportunity to train under her guidance at the Centre for Psychological Astrology at Regents College in London. After 4 years, Helen attained the Diploma in Psychological Astrology and went on to set up a private practice. After meeting the author Jeff Stray in 2002 and reading his book Beyond 2012, Helen has been looking at the astrological significance of this time and has reached some very interesting conclusions. She's written and spoken about her findings and has given many interviews such as the one you're about to hear. In recent years, Helen has also become interested in the bigger cycles of the outer planets and how they affect individuals, countries and society at large. Her website is astrologicalinsights.co.uk. Hello and welcome, Helen, and thank you very much for joining us today on LegalizeFreedom.com.
That's a pleasure, Greg. I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Excellent. Well, now we're here today to discuss astrology, your work as an astrologer, and we're going to talk a great deal about the astrology of 2012, a very significant time that we're at the heart of right now, and of course the key date in 2012, December the 21st, fast approaching. But before we get into all that, if we just assume that most of the people, if not all of the people listening to this, realise that when we say astrology, we're not talking about Russell Grant and Mystic Meg, and you're going to meet a tall dark stranger and the sort of thing that you get in the tabloid press. So we have that as a given. On your website, you talk about your approach as psychological astrology, and it seems that you came to astrology through psychology. So perhaps you could tell us about your introduction to astrology, your past before that, how you got to where you are now, and basically set out psychological astrology, what that is for us.
Yeah, sure. Well, basically, I think that my interest, I could pretty much trace it back to when I was 7 and my dad took me to Jodrell Bank, you know, the big radio telescope in Cheshire.
Yes.
And we went into the room and there I saw the whole universe and the solar system, and I was just blown away by it. I thought it was amazing. And I bought my Ladybird Book of the Stars. And I guess that was just a sort of a fascination in the planets dating back from then. But then when I got into my teenage years and I bought my Linda Goodman sun signs and I began to realize that, I can really connect with this. So then I did various evening classes in my early 20s. And then and I used to start doing charts for family and friends and that kind of thing. And the more I studied it, the more I realized what an amazing tool it is. And then I thought my greatest author, if you like, is Liz Greene. And I read all of her books. She's a psychological astrologer, and I very much was had a great big interest in the fact that, say, Carl Jung used astrology to give him insights into his patient's psyche. And to me, it did seem to be like the best map of the psyche that we've got. It gives the most incredible amount of information about each individual, which is represented by the moment that we are born, because every moment in time is reflected in the heavens. And so therefore you can draw a map of that moment and interpret it. So I then decided to do the 4-year diploma with Liz Greene and her school, the Centre for Psychological Astrology at Regents College in London. That was in about 2000. And then I qualified and set up my own practice. And then I met Jeff Stray. And he wrote the book Ecstasy, or what's it called? I've got the name of it now.
Oh, I was only looking at it the other day as well, but it's his 2012
yes,
expose.
Yeah, that's right. Beyond 2012.
Yeah, that's
is the title. Now, he wanted me to look at the chart for the 21st of December 2012. And this set me on quite a path. So this is about 6-7 years ago now. And I looked at it, and then I thought, yeah, this it says a lot, actually. It speaks a lot of these times that we're entering into. And then I decided to write an article about it. And then since then, I've done lots of talks to various groups, not all astrologers, just mundane groups, alternative groups, that kind of thing. And then it set me on a path. There's a branch of astrology called Mundane astrology, which is looking at the charts of countries and events and things like that. And it was, I found that the chart of England seems very tied in with the whole 2012 phenomenon, and that's why I centre in on that. And I think that we are going to be quite a significant player in the whole of this process of transformation that we're going through. And, you know, it wasn't, I don't think, a coincidence that when they were deciding who was going to host the Olympics, and the French were the, that's supposed to be the ones that were going to win, and we were not considered so highly at the time. And I looked at the chart and I thought, oh yeah, I think that we actually are going to be on the world stage this year.
Yes, well, we'll come on to the full kind of ramifications for this country, the UK, Great Britain, in due course. But those of us who are around at the time that the Olympic decision was announced will remember that the French champagne corks were virtually halfway out of the bottles, and it really did seem like a done deal. So it was quite a surprise. But as you say, with some foresight and certainly hindsight, it made a lot of sense in that context. You were saying about, with regards to birth charts, that each moment is unique with regards to the alignment in the heavens. I mean, or perhaps I'm making that up, but is each moment, as above, so below, completely unique? Each set of alignments, configurations, does it ever repeat, or is it possible for that to repeat?
I don't think so. I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, all the planets are orbiting around the sun at different speeds. So therefore, the probability of them all making an exact alignment, I would say, is so incredibly rare. I don't know, but I can't imagine it ever happening. Maybe once in a millennia or something like that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that.
Now, maybe this is just because I'm a man, but one of the things that interested me when I started to look at astrology was to say, okay, we can see here, statistics show us that there is a tremendous correlation between, transits in the heavens and types of events that we can see taking place, and and personality types and all sorts of things that we can map that suggest that something's going on. And the first thing I wanted to get into was like, what's happening here? How is this happening? Because we know that the moon, for example, exerts a physical influence on the Earth, through the tides, and it also seems to create changes within us that are well documented. I mean, in your 2012 article you referred to, you mentioned the fact that we have full moons, we have crime rates going up, and asylums and hospitals reporting much more disruption. So, and I know you have said that you or no one else really understands the mechanism of how astrology works, but in the time since you first wrote that piece, which I think was in 2008, correct me if I'm wrong, are we any further forward? Has anyone, yourself or anyone else working in the field, been able to say any, even speculation, informed speculation about how the mechanisms of this might be functioning?
No, is the answer. I don't think we're remotely there yet, because that goes into the territory of looking at the interconnectedness of the universe, I believe. And it's almost like a system, and it's all kind of working together in harmony in some way. And I believe the ancients understood it better, and the way they assigned certain gods to certain planets is quite fascinating. I love that aspect of astrology, the myths, because they really help us in understanding our human dilemma, our human condition. But in terms of how astrology works, I don't know. Some people do think that there is something that is kind of beaming down, if you like, a bit like the way the moon draws the tides and affects water so much on our planet. In terms of the other planets, I don't know. I really don't know. Only through years and years and years of studying and seeing and experience of people and their charts is that there is such a strong correlation. It just can't be disputed, really.
Yeah, well, I think certainly in the mainstream, one of the reasons that astrology, just as a catch-all field, quite broad one, perhaps sometimes gets dismissed, is because, as you referred to, it seems that many ancient civilizations, and we are after all talking about the Mayan 2012 here to some extent, they had this understanding that what was happening in the sky was significant, and they were able to begin to follow it, to watch it, to chart it, and to form an understanding of patterns. And it's almost like, because they did ascribe these myths and gods were associated with planets, that's made it easy to debunk the whole thing, just as, it was just the flim-flam of like primitive peoples. And it seems that even as the science moves forward, that perception still persists, unfortunately, in the mainstream.
Well, it does, but at one point in our not so distant past, astrology and astronomy was very much one science. Yes. But it's the same with the divide between the world of science and the world of, say, the alternative world or the spiritual. There's a great divide, and I think that one day we're both science and the alternative crew, if you like, they will eventually reach the same point in their understanding. And it seems that things that astrologers or mystics or those types of people have been saying for years, science is gradually, if you like, proving it, or at least investigating it. And I think as time goes by, especially as we advance further and further into the age of Aquarius, that these things we will reach the same point at some time in the future.
Yeah, this is a key point you've made here that I was going to bring up later on. Actually, was that exactly that a time when astronomy and astrology were not different. There was one thing, and we're living in a time now where art and science and spirituality and the paranormal, all the false divisions are becoming revealed, and that really the universe is interconnected, and that everything is basically one thing. It's just different manifestations of the same energy, if you like to put it like that.
Yeah, exactly. And it could be that one day science does realise that, that the Earth is a living being in some way, has some level of consciousness of its own. And, I really believe that all the planets are conscious entities in their own right.
Yeah, well, that's the idea of the universe as a thought, which is quite a mind-bending one for some people. But the idea that what we're seeing out in here, down here, up there, out there, everywhere, is the manifestation of one. I'll say entity, for want of a better word. Some people say God.
Yeah. But I think we are all part of it.
Yes.
We're all part of the system, if you like. Some ways, I suppose it's a bit like the Matrix.
Absolutely, yeah. That's sort of the system is, in that sense, is neither good or bad. It's sort of benign up to a point. It's just the system.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned how things moved on and really opened up in astrology with the discovery of the outer planets in our solar system, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And just perhaps you could say something about the significance of that, the time, obviously it was quite a span of years between those different planets being discovered, but each has had a very significant effect. So you could say something about that, and then also what effect does it, we carry on discovering more heavenly bodies, whether they're planets or moons, the potential effect there for our understanding and interpretation of astrology.
Yeah, well, in ancient times, or certainly since the discovery of the three outer planets, astrology was used much more predictively. There wasn't any concept of the individual as such, so it would only be the king or the queen of a country that would have a court astrologer, because how the king or queen fared, that is how the whole country fared. And the astrologer would predict certain things, such as Nostradamus, for instance, and they believed it totally. And looking at ancient texts, it would seem that they did come true. Now, I think that where we were ready to receive, the consciousness of a new planet, then we were ready to sort of take a leap forward. And when Uranus was discovered in 1771, that was a time of revolution. The late 1700s, we had the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Industrial Revolution. It was a time to sort of overthrow the old. It was a time to bring in the new, extremely idealistic. And Uranus is the idealistic sky god, the one that wants utopia. And it also represents, when we have a Uranus transit in our charts, it always represents that urge for individuation, for self-awareness, for self-knowledge, to break away, to become authentic, our authentic selves. So it's a very complex and interesting planet. And when that energy came into the collective, I know, talking like that, I don't know what other word to use other than energy. I'm not sure how it operates and whether it is just a mirror of what is going on in society at the time. But those times, when you look back, were a huge leap forward for mankind. Uranus is rules the airy detached sign of Aquarius. Very idealistic in the way it is. And then when Neptune was discovered, that is the planet which is associated with the spiritual, with the numinous, with our connection with the Godhead, if you like. It's that deep longing in all of us to return back to that pre-birth state, whether it be in the womb or before then. That oneness, whereby there's no hard reality, there's no suffering, there's no responsibility. And at the time, so it's very much to do with illusion and fantasy. And at the time, that's when we discover photography and film and that kind of thing, creating illusion. And then when Pluto was discovered in 1930, so Pluto is the dark lord of the underworld, and he rules the intense, complex sign of Scorpio, very watery sign. And when during the period around that time was the rise of the Third Reich, because Pluto is about power and control, and also control through fear. More positively, it was the birth of depth psychology, and if you can use the underworld as a metaphor for our unconscious, and then we can understand that if we go into looking at our unconscious and shine a light on the darker recesses, if you like, then those very complex feelings and emotions can be transformed into something that we're able to be conscious of. So it's a very, very deep and intense planet. And you can see that as they come into the world consciousness, this brings us on. Now, there have, of course, been a lot of dwarf planets being discovered in recent years.
Yes.
I haven't started to use them. The one I use is Chiron, that was discovered in the mid-70s, and the reason that is that astrologers took it up and they realised what a powerful influence it was in somebody's chart. And in myth, Chiron is the wounded healer. And of course, in the mid-70s, that's when we had the mushrooming of alternative therapies, group therapy, all the talking therapies. It really, really mushroomed at that time, as that energy came into our consciousness. Now, in terms of, these dwarf planets like Eris and Sedna and the like, we don't quite, even though they've been assigned their names and therefore the myths that go with them, astrologers haven't very much, as far as I know, really integrated them into their work. There are some astrologers that use them, but at the moment I certainly feel that there's enough information from the known planets plus Chiron.
Yeah, whose business is it assigning names and characteristics or myths?
Well, it seems to be the people that discover them. There's the scientific community, and I always think that is quite phenomenal, the way synchronistically they do choose their names, and then the way it works, the way then we take that on board, and the god becomes alive.
Yes. Do you think the people who discover them are being chosen, perhaps? In a way, and they're not so much discovering the planet as kind of in the reverse. It's almost like there's something manifesting, and on that day they were going to discover this, and they even though they might have thought that they named it and attributed something to it, then that was always going to be there. It was always going to be that way.
I think so. I really do. I think that there's always something greater at work. With the naming of planets, because it's so synchronistic. and so powerful.
Yes, exactly. Well, to borrow a astronomical metaphor, and I hope this question isn't too nebulous, but
Yeah.
what could we say about? I mean, in terms of astrology, what does astrology or astrologers have to say, or about the rest of even the known universe? What else we can see out there? What regard you might give it? What speculation there is about it? I'm just guessing. My question is there astrology in the rest of the universe?
Probably. Some astrologers do use the fixed stars, for instance, in their charts and in their interpretations. So, yeah, the universe out there certainly can be used if the planets or the stars are named and an understanding of their meaning is known.
So this potentially opens up. Well, again, it's the same. If we allow that the same for astronomy, many of the things affecting it will affect astrology. As you say, one day they may again converge. This literally opens up a whole universe, because the potential out there for discovery from an astronomical point of view also then would lead you to say, well, there's enormous potential for discovery from an astrological point of view. So little we really know.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it is a vast subject. It is a vast subject, and it has lots of different branches. And as you know, I took the psychological route because I like to use it most of all in understanding human beings and their different characteristics, and it's just a really really good tool for helping self-understanding.
Yes, well, I think this is why so many people, even at the most basic level, do gravitate towards the stuff I mentioned at the start. The little 100-word, your stars today in magazines or whatever, because they want to learn something about themselves.
Yes.
Maybe even something they already know, but they want to. And people read these things, even the daftest little things, with just such a sense of wonder.
Yeah, I know. It's in there somewhere, isn't it? And so many of my clients, when they come and I give a reading, and they'll say, gosh, it's so good to have this or that confirmed. But because there's often doubts about, and lots of people have lots of shoulds. I should be like this, or I should be like that, or I should be like him or her. And when I say, well, that's not really you. It's kind of quite affirming for them.
Yeah, I mean, I was probably somewhat skeptical growing up about astrology in general, simply because, yet again, the mainstream version of it. But I did meet someone at a pivotal point in my life who almost instantly took a great interest in my sort of star sign. This was just something that this individual did with almost everyone, I think. You can probably relate to this. And I got into this sort of rundown of various things, characteristics and traits and all sorts of information that I thought, does actually sound quite a lot like me. And I learnt quite a lot from this person. And all I'll say is that in the intervening years, I've got claim no particular interest in astrology, other than, any more so than any other sort of 100,000 things I'm interested in. But too often I've seen people exhibiting particular characteristics, if that's the right language to use, that I thought this bears some relation to astrology, their chart, their lives. And I've seen it happen too often. And this is not having an open conversation with people about astrology. They've got no idea what I'm thinking, but I just thought it's just another little box has been ticked. So that's why I know there's something to this. And that's probably why, as I say earlier, I had that slightly male approach of trying to take it apart and understand it like you would the engine of a car.
Yes, yeah, that is is something that I come across a lot with the males. But even if you just break astrology down into its elements, fire, earth, air, and water, is fascinating in its own right, because the fire signs they're opposite to earth. Earth is to do with the real world, They understand about the slow cycles of the world. They're very good in the whole world of sensation and being able to get things done, their bills paid, organised. They very much live in the known world. Whereas fire, being opposite, it lives in the realms of potential. It lives in the realm of myth, and they see symbol in everything. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that get very easily bored with routine tasks, or there's an impatience there. It's quite future oriented. Fire. They're very good, for looking at prospects and that kind of thing. And then we've got the other pair, which is air and water, which are also opposite, because air is the thinking types. They're the ones that look at the world through rational eyes, and they really want to understand it. Whereas the water signs, they come from the guts or feeling realms. And so there's often an attraction with these two pairs because of the fascination with the differences. But of course it can cause a lot of problems once you've established that, because then it's sort of, I think it's inherent in human nature that we want other people to behave and react the same way as ourselves. And when they don't, it's a great puzzlement to us. So I think that, through astrology, this can give an enormous understanding about the differences between us all, even if you just look at it in terms of that. And just as a caveat, even though you might be a fire sign, that might not be the most dominant element in your chart. So you could be, say, a Leo, but actually be quite earthy. Or you could be a Scorpio, but actually be quite airy and rational. It depends on the balance in your particular chart. Yes. And even if you look at the glyphs, the symbols for the signs of the zodiac, we've got, and you look at the water signs, for instance, Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, they're ancient crustaceans or ancient creatures, cold-blooded. They come from a very primitive place, whereas the air signs are represented by a human form, which is, Gemini, the twins, or Aquarius, the water bearer, or even an inanimate object, Libra. And then they are what make us most human, because we have that reasoning faculty that the animals don't have. Do you see how it is?
Yeah, absolutely.
We wouldn't have society without the air signs, because they're the ones that make rational decisions. They don't just sort of leap in with an emotional reactions to things. They think and reason, and that's how society is made up. We couldn't have society without behaving in a kind of a rational and reasoning way. So it's reflected in the glyphs even.
Actually, speaking of opposites, kind of brings to mind the idea that, if one of the central themes of our time is thinking about, in universal terms, is thinking about unity, then possibly only second to that is duality that we see all around us in everything.
Well, that is true. That is true. But I think that when there's something that doesn't flow, that's where we get the most growth, if you understand what I mean. So it's like in society, and I presume we're going to go on to speak about 2012, but
yes,
the aspects. But in society, that's when we tend to get the biggest leaps forward, is when we've got very challenging aspects and between the planets. Whereas when it's a time of harmony, or if you meet somebody and their chart is very harmonious, they often like the easy life, because they're not challenged so much. And you meet people, and they're more than satisfied to live a very, very simple life. Very routine orientated, very safe, very secure, and they don't like to step out of that. But people that have got much more challenging charts, often starting with a difficult childhood and issues that they've had to, painful issues that they've had to overcome in their lives, and they find that they have lots of challenges in their life, but then they're often quite adventurous types. So they often are the ones that stand up, to bring humanity on, the Promethean types, if you like. Yes.
No, well, we virtually had wound ourselves around to the subject of 2012. Actually, one just small by point I wanted to put before you was the idea that, and this goes back to the days of when astrology and astronomy weren't separate disciplines, and the days of the royal or court astrologer, and we think that that's all long behind us. But when you go looking, you find out that there's a lot of people in great positions of power and influence in this world who virtually do not take a step outside their front door or do anything of import or significance without consulting an astrologer. It's just not widely reported.
Well, look at Ronald and Nancy Reagan, for instance. It was claimed that they didn't do any public affairs or meetings without consulting their astrologer. So I think the powers that be do have an understanding, or certainly, well, when you think of the whole occult world,
yes,
I think it is used.
Okay, regarding the astrology for 2012, I say you first started looking at this quite some time ago. So perhaps you could just summarize the situation and perhaps say what has changed or what has perhaps unfolded or come to your notice in the time that you first started looking at this up until now, when we are in the midst of 2012 itself.
Yeah. Well, when I first started to look at it, the students, for instance, they seemed very that they didn't seem the generation to be standing up and protesting or anything like that. That they seemed very amenable to authority, and there didn't seem to be any sense that something was going to come from them, which is how it's always been in the past, with student uprisings and that kind of thing. So I talk about these times last year and this year, and in a way, and I was thinking, gosh, well, it just seemed like a long shot because it seemed so alien to what was going on when I was first looking at this in 2006. And it's the same with that revolutionary spirit as well, because we just weren't in those times. And I also spoke of, the changes that we would see in our institutions from 2008, when Pluto moves into the earthy sign of Capricorn, and when Pluto is the planet of death, transformation, and rebirth. And when it goes through a sign, all the things that sign rules, that's when they come up into focus to be changed. And it's usually very, very difficult during the death phase, if you like. And a lot of astrologers were really stunned at how quick it all started to manifest. And I think that everything is moving at such a pace now. We're almost forgetting that we're in it, and we have been for a few years already. And some people say, oh, well, there's not that much going on. But it's almost because we're so caught up in the maelstrom of it. But you just have to turn on the news every day to see what is going on. And it's not just in this country, it's absolutely global. It's going on around the world. And while we're in it, it's it's difficult to keep our heads above water to get that bird's eye view of what is happening. But I've certainly noticed that the things that I was talking about 6 years ago are manifesting, which is, exciting on the one hand, but sort of disturbing on another level as well.
Yeah, it's almost a bit like sort of, I don't know. Oh, I met John Lennon once. You think he'd be taller. It's like, I lived through 2012. You think it'd be more dramatic. And then, as you say, you look out the window, you look on TV, and there's upheaval, change, some of it positive, a lot of it negative. There's destruction, violence. I mean, it's unprecedented scale, short of, world wars.
Yeah.
But it's almost like we're having a slow motion world war and a slow motion financial collapse and all manner of upheaval. And as you say, it's because we sometimes kind of preconceived ideas about what something's going to be like, especially if you went back to the 1980s and read something about 2012, what might be set out there would be almost science fiction, fantastical in nature by comparison to what's happening now. But when you're right in the middle of something, that you're too close to it.
Yes, exactly. I think that there's certainly a collective anxiety going on at the moment because Capricorn rules the establishment, it rules governments, it rules the real world. It's the last of the earth signs, so it's very much to do with the earth, the climate, things like volcanoes and earthquakes, that sort of thing. It's also to do with all the establishment and institutions. So we're seeing this breaking down. And the thing about Capricorn, which is ruled by the planet Saturn, he's the strict father of the zodiac, if you like. He's the one that sets our boundaries. He's the one that sort of makes us secure through our sort of monetary system. So to have that feeling that things are collapsing, because a lot of us project onto authority or onto these institutions a parental image. There was a time not that long ago where people would think of the bank manager as somebody that they could really trust, or their priest, somebody they could really trust, or government, and it's all collapsing. And it's incredibly anxiety-provoking for people. This is unprecedented in recent times. And how do we deal with that? So I think there's sort of this denial going on for some people, or this wanting reassurance or wanting to still believe. But as more and more is being exposed, the corruption, it's almost like Pluto is ruthless when it goes through a sign. Everything comes up, and all the established things that we've known for eons are coming up, and they're being destroyed. But things don't get destroyed if they're working and if they're functioning well, and they're not. It's exposing the fact that they're not. But this is very, very disturbing for people.
Well, we were invited for a long time to take a look in the mirror, and now everywhere we turn, it's just, a hall of mirrors. And I feel it's like we're children in the universe, and we're being invited to grow up and to take responsibility.
Yeah.
And in doing, as part of doing this, we're being shown the dark side of what we can be, what we can create, what we can destroy, and invited to transcend that. And I think ultimately a lot of the observers of 2012, whether they're interpreting myths and stories from the past and projections into the future, or doing their own original work, and all the many disciplines and approaches that are being brought to bear on this, many of them are speaking of this, ultimately as a positive process. And also significantly, and this will nexus in with what you were saying about people not perhaps thinking anything's happening, is that the changes around 2012 are predominantly going to be gradual and not sudden. So we may see some world events happen relatively suddenly, but this is part of a bigger process that could take many, many years.
I believe so. I think we're certainly already in it, and I think things really started to crank up in 2008 with the whole financial thing, and then we have the MPs' expenses scandals, all the church scandals, all the things that were not working. They're not right. They need to be changed. But I agree with you in terms of us needing to grow up, take responsibility, because it's moving away from that childlike state. And that, for me, calls to mind the whole Pluto myth, when Demeter and her daughter Persephone were living in bliss and harmony, and everything was bountiful, and there was no death, no suffering, and Persephone was totally innocent of anything bad or horrible. And then one day Pluto comes up out of the underworld, abducts Persephone, drags her into his kingdom and rapes her, takes away her innocence. And I think there's something about that. And when we experience a Pluto transit, it can feel like our innocence is being taken away. And a really good example of this was when America went through its 9/11, because Pluto was going over the ascendant of America's chart. It was 12 degrees Sagittarius, and it was a time when America could have looked at its own foreign policy and how it was operating in the world, a lot of soul searching, but it was almost like, that sort of teenager gung-ho kind of attitude. And so they saw Pluto as the destroyer. And that attack that they had never ever had anything like that happen to them before in their history. So for them, it was like their innocence being taken away. It was a massive wake-up call. I think it's extremely unfortunate that they used the other side of Pluto, which is control through fear, and that has very quickly spread around the world, with Britain taking on the whole control thing to the nth degree. But at the moment, the planet Uranus is in a very, very challenging aspect with Pluto, and will be for the next 3 years. And Uranus is the rebel. He's the one that wants freedom. He's the one, as I described earlier, he wants to create something new and overthrow the old. Works often very suddenly, very shockingly. So these two are kind of sparring up, and we can see it all over. So that when Uranus moved into the more warlike sign of Aries last March, a year ago, we started to have all the Middle Eastern uprisings. It was again, incredible the way that suddenly came into being, and that was against all the sort of despots that have been in power for 40 odd years being toppled. So we've got this revolutionary force on the one hand, and on the other we've got those controlling forces that want to control everything through fear. It's like the battle of the titans going on. And even people are experiencing it in their own lives. Anybody that's got a personal planet, or the sun and moon, in the early degrees of the cardinal signs, so that's Aries, Cancer, Libra and Capricorn, will be experiencing what's going on the world stage in their own lives.
Yes, well, ultimately, it can be a transformative event for the individual, as well as the nation, the planet, the bigger system at the end of the day. Talking about the Plutonian control through fear, of course, we're now in 2012. You and I are speaking today in England. The Olympic Games are about to begin. 2012, we spoke about that earlier, and this just seemed to be made. It was fortuitous. It was meant to happen in a way. And we see that coming together here, 2012, the Games, all eyes on England, and also a manifestation of this control grid, of this excessive need to clamp everything down and keep a lid on things. And well, you know, what the energy will be like in this country, certainly during the Olympics, when all eyes are on the UK. Well, we're about to find out.
Yeah, indeed. It's just been quite incredible. I don't particularly like the energy of what's surrounding the whole Olympics. And of course, in the conspiracy world, there is so much being doom-mongering about what is going to occur. I looked at the charts of the opening ceremony, and I did a chart for the closing ceremony. They haven't released the exact time yet of the closing ceremony. I'm not sure why. But the opening ceremony chart looks fairly benign. But the closing ceremony chart it has more tension in it. But you have to be careful with that a little bit, because, for instance, when we had the Jubilee, and that weekend, we had an incredibly difficult, tension-filled aspect with the full moon squaring Mars. Now, that was very, very similar to the aspect that we had with the 7/7 bombings. Now, the thing with Mars is that it's energy. It's that masculine drive. It requires action. It's very difficult to sort of contain the energy, that Martian energy. And so I was thinking, when we had the 7/7 bombings, there wasn't that much going on at the time. Whereas if you look at the Diamond Jubilee, there was an incredible amount of energy put into, pulling off the whole celebrations and everything. And thankfully, in a way, that dissipated that Mars energy. I'm sure around the world it would have manifested much more violently and that kind of thing. But for this country, at least, that energy was dissipated. And the same thing could be for the chart of the closing ceremony, that even though there's tension in it, because there's so much going on, it's almost like that energy has to be channeled somehow. So that's why predictive astrology is incredibly difficult, because we don't know how something is going to manifest. We can interpret Mars. Yes, it can be angry, violent. It's kind of warlike in a way. But if that energy is channeled positively, then it's not going to come out in a negative way. So we will have to see on that one. I don't know. I know a lot of people are wanting me to sort of say exactly what's going to happen. I don't know. And that's the truth. I don't know.
No, it doesn't work like that, of course. And it's reminds us of the misinterpretations around other systems such as the tarot or runes, and people looking for direct correlations between symbolism or characteristics and trying to tie that into specific people, events, places, and it's just not that simplistic. Regarding the changes surrounding 2012, occurring before it and indeed afterwards, and them being gradual for the most part in nature, not sudden. Nevertheless, we have the headline date, of course, December 21st, which is going to be a Friday. And the $2012 question is, what is astrology saying, or your reading of things telling us about that particular time, and putting in place all the caveats that you've just yourself mentioned. I'm just interested to get your take on that.
Yeah, well, I really like to look at the chart, which I do for 21st of December 2012, um, for London. And I choose London because obviously I live here, and so curious to know what's going on for us in this country. But also then, through looking at that, it made me realise that actually there's a reason why I think that we are going to be on the world stage this year, and the fact that we've got the Olympics and everything, because we have a very unique geology, the most unique geology in the world. We have, huge continents, and they have much more of a mono geology. And I think with different rocks, we have different earth energies. And I think earth energies really do influence its people. And for those of you who don't know, countries have charts as well as people. And we live in a Capricorn country. That's why a country's personalities are so different. That's why we're so different to, say, the Italians or the Germans. We have our own unique personality. So we're a Capricorn country, which makes us quite traditional, quite stoic. We like, sort of rules, regulations, our monarchy, that kind of thing. It's very stiff upper lip, like to be seen to be doing the right thing, quite old-fashioned in lots of ways. And it has Aries rising, which is, the sign much more to do, it's a go-getting kind of sign. Aries likes a conquest. It likes a challenge. And, that combination of the two is very significant for its people. Now, in the chart of 2012, Pluto, the planet of death and transformation and power and control, is going over the midheaven of England's chart and its sun. And the midheaven is the point in the chart to do with our public standing. It's where we are on the world stage. And just to give an example of what can happen when Pluto goes over a person's sun, for instance, when Pluto went over Margaret Thatcher's sun, that's when she came to power. Now, to have that going over our sun and our midheaven means that all the world's eyes are going to be on us, and it's an opportunity. The same as it was for America when they had Pluto going over their ascendant. It's an opportunity for us to step into our power and to use it for the good of all in a conscious way. Because when we're not conscious with Pluto energy, then it operates through fear. Fear, and when we have fear, we want to control. So there's that going on at the same time. We have Neptune, the planet of selfless service. It rules Pisces, the watery sign of Pisces. That is on the ascendant, which is a very powerful and sensitive spot on the chart. And it is with the planetoid Chiron. Now, I've met a lot of people that have huge expectations for 2012. They really are expecting a sudden shift into the fifth dimension. They're really, and I know one guy is an attorney, so it's not, a wacko or anything like that, but he phoned me up and he wanted me to do his chart for the 21st of December. And he said, well, make it my death chart, because he believed that he was going to jump off Bell Rock in America, and that he was going to go through a portal into another dimension. And it's like a lot of the expectations that people have got sort of made me realise that Neptune Chiron together like that speaks of sort of collective disappointment, collective disillusionment. Because what is going to happen to all those people that have got such a massive expectation?
Oh, this is a huge question. I've discussed and debated with other people is the immediate aftermath of, when everyone wakes up, assuming we do. I'm kind of in the let's wait and see what happens camp, because again, we don't know. We can believe what we like, but ultimately we either know something or we don't know it. It doesn't matter what we believe. But what will then happen to people who really have invested so much, genuine, spiritual, well-meaning people who may yet be proven right in some way, but what happens to their world, their reality? Where do they go from then? Does it all just kind of fade away and disintegrate? Do we then build towards some next future date? I think Isaac Newton had 2060 in part of some of his writings. People probably don't know Isaac Newton as a student of the sort of esoteric, but he was. Do we then do what past civilizations and societies have done and start projecting towards another future date that we can all build towards? Yeah, it's a really big question. There'll certainly be some personal fallout there.
Yes, I really do think that. I mean, all you can do with astrology is kind of speculate and look at what's happened in the past. But so many people are putting a lot on 2012. Has been an incredibly auspicious time. There is a very interesting aspect in the chart called a Yod, or finger of God, and it is very fated. So we've got the planet Jupiter, the planet to do with expansion and optimism and exaggeration, if you like, and it's in the sign of Gemini, which rules the mind, it rules knowledge. So if there was to be, an expansion of our consciousness, that would be, a very apt placement for Jupiter. And the two planets that are also involved in that configuration are Saturn, giving it a sense of reality and gravitas, and Pluto, which is to do with transformation. And they're both, those two heavyweights are channeling that energy right down through to Jupiter at the apex of this triangle. If there was to be any kind of shift in consciousness, that certainly would be quite apt. But the thing about astrology is that it can, what can happen is that the meanings come into focus. It's almost like putting on a pair of glasses with a coloured lens which represents a different aspect. And so, for instance, with Uranus square Pluto at the moment, and they've been in orb certainly over the last year, and I thought it was quite fascinating when Uranus moved into Aries, and Fukushima happened. There was so much talk about uranium and plutonium.
Yes.
And again, with the Olympic Games, because this aspect's going on for 3 years, but I think we're going to hear an awful lot in the news about nuclear explosions and that kind of thing, or nuclear power, because it's suddenly in our consciousness, whether something manifests or not, is what I'm trying to say. Like some people talk about, there's going to be a nuclear bomb at the Olympics, that kind of thing. It's almost like we're very, very aware of the energies of Uranus and Pluto at the moment, and so therefore it's on our consciousness. We're going to talk about it. It's going to be in the media, whether it manifests or not. It's the same with the fact that Neptune has returned back to its own sign after 165 years. And when a planet's in its own sign, it's very, very powerful. So if we look back 165 years ago, there was a huge resurgence in spirituality. There was a lot of people having parlor seances. There was spirit photography. There was a real movement there. So what I was thinking is that, over the next 14 years, because Neptune is going to be in Pisces the next 14 years, is that there is going to be this sort of resurgence in the spiritual, in a bigger picture, because I think it's a human condition to seek redemption. And I think that it's going to sort of counteract the very hard stuff, all the hard reality that's going on. I think it's going to give us deep compassion, and also maybe it can influence us more in terms of seeing the world through different lenses. I don't think it's going to be. It's like when the cycles go round. It's like a spiral. So we return back to a similar time, but it's different. It's moved on.
Yes.
I think the biggest move we've got is all the technology that we've got.
Yeah, I've heard it described as an upward spiral, which fits in exactly with what you described. It comes round and it reaches the same point, but it's at an elevated level.
Yes. And the fact that Neptune has been through Aquarius, and Aquarius rules new technology. It's an air sign, very rational, very logical, very much to do with technology. And Neptune is where we all seek to be one. And so over the last 14 years, we've seen the incredible mushrooming of mobile phone, internet, all that, so we can be anywhere and still feel connected on a mind level. Now that Neptune's gone into Pisces, that has a completely different feel to it. And I suppose it's my fantasy in a way that we won't have to rely on modern technology, that we will develop more our telepathy or our psychic abilities. And I think there'll be a lot more investigations in those realms over the next 14 years or so.
And it may well be that in that particular respect that we move back towards something that we have lost. I read something fascinating, and sadly can't remember exactly where, but about how a time traveller to ancient Egypt might have been surprised by how quiet it was, because people weren't rushing about all over the place and they weren't babbling at each other. They were quite often sitting still, and they could communicate, but with telepathy. And it was a fascinating. It really conjured up in my mind a scene that was so completely different. And again, we sort of tend to ascribe characteristics onto peoples of the past whom we've got no direct experience of, that they must have been very much like us.
That's really fascinating, actually. Yeah, really fascinating.
Yeah, I'm just sorry I say that my just too many things trying to keep into my head. Some of them seem to fall out sometimes. But I think there's such a deep-seated dissatisfaction with what you said, the hard reality stuff, that it's not serving us, and we realise that it's not really us, and that in fact it's now not only not serving us, it's actually threatening to destroy us. And we have entities in the world now, such as governments and corporations, that are completely inhumane. And by that I don't just mean cruel, but there's no one driving. It's not people behind it, even though it is. It's not individuals. These have taken on a psychopathic life of their own, and they're destroying themselves and us at the same time. So I think this need we have to transcend all of that inevitably gives rise to people wanting some kind of deliverance, some kind of transformative event, preferably as quick as possible, thank you very much, so that we can move beyond this. But I think that tendency, inherent in it is still something positive that we can turn around and use, particularly if 2012 turns out to be, for some people, a disappointment, that we mustn't lose focus on that. We need to take ourselves on a path to a better place, and we must keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And to bear in mind that, the old adage, no pain, no gain, I'm afraid that's the way it is. And that's when we've had our greatest leaps forward, is through difficult times and through challenges to get somewhere. I mean, the Uranus-Pluto cycle is also associated with the slavery. It's anything that has been repressed and dishonoured it's now an opportunity to move through that to a better time, and that's why it's linked to feminism and for women as well, the suffragettes and that kind of thing. Also, they wouldn't have got the vote. They wouldn't have moved forward just by sort of sitting around, thinking love and light. They had to act. And that's the thing, that we do have to act. We do have to take responsibility. I don't think we're suddenly going to be saved. I think that it comes through quite a lot of hard work, actually, mainly to do with consciousness and to be mindful of our actions and what we create, this world that we're creating. And unfortunately, our leaders are mouthpieces for the collective.
Yes. Well,
so that gives us, an idea of the level of the nation's consciousness.
Yeah, well, as I say, it may all be written in the stars, and some of us may be able to read it, but we have to remember that we're also writing the script of our lives, of our existence, at the end of the day. And when we realise that, then it really is our destiny. Is just that, it's ours.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the optimistic side, is that with the Uranus-Pluto cycle, is that we do, it does give us opportunities to break out and to become more conscious. And the more conscious we become, the more choices we have, rather than acting blindly or coming from that place of instinct. We can sort of rationalise things. We can make rational decisions about how to be, rather than just reacting.
Yes, and rational and intuitive as well. There's sort of a partnership there for that, what we can work out, and also what we know.
Yeah, exactly. It's not one above the other at all. It is trusting our instincts. Becoming very, very as conscious as we can individually, so that then that can ripple out. I think that I'm very saddened by the dumbing down that we have in society. I think that's a terrible shame. I mean, where is the sort of the aspirational side of humanity that wants to bring us forward, to become greater than what we are, those Promethean spirits. It's, I think it's a huge problem, I think we live in quite a sick society in lots of ways, and it needs to change. It really needs to change. And I'm hoping that what is interesting is with the planetary aspects at the moment is because Pluto is going through the very earthy, mundane sign of Capricorn, that people are being forced to change, because you get the kind of the more new age or alternative types that might think about self-development and growth and all that. But there are an awful lot of the population that don't operate like that. They're very much in the real world. And so through the breaking down of the establishment of the financial institutions and things like that, they are being forced to change their lives because of physical hardship in lots of ways, with the austerity measures and that kind of thing. So it's like every level of society is being given an opportunity, and usually it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one because we don't change unless things become too uncomfortable. And that's, I believe, is what's going on at the moment. And certainly for the forthcoming future, we're going to see a lot more of that kind of thing going on. The breaking down so that something new can come in its place. And disillusionment plays a big part in that, I think.
Yes, but ultimately, this is a positive point, I think, which to wind up for today is that, as you say, all worthwhile transformation has its difficult aspects, and it's something that needs to happen. We shouldn't stick with the the familiar that's killing us, and it's broken just because it's familiar. So, and I've got to ask you actually, in closing, if you've got any plans for December 21st.
Probably go down to somewhere like Avebury or something, along with 10,000 other people, or maybe even somewhere locally that's significant here. I haven't actually sort of honed in on exactly where yet.
Yeah,
how about you?
I don't know yet. I kind of I'm really not sure. I'm not making any plans. I think I will actually just wait and see what happens. I think if anything is going to come along, anything in particular, then I'll become aware of it when I become aware of it. I know there's a lot of people making a beeline for Central and South American sites and what have you. I did hear today rather disturbing news that in Mexico that the government has actually prevented any of the main elders, the main groups, from holding any ceremonies on December the 21st in their own temples.
Really?
Yeah, and I haven't had a chance to look into this yet. I was just had it from a reliable source. Excuse me, but if so, that would be a potentially somewhat disturbing. I have to say, why would they do that? What difference would it make? But so I think as far as December 21st goes, let's just get the first cup of coffee in the morning out of the way, and then see what happens at 11 minutes past 11. And if we're all still living and breathing, then we'll take the rest of the day as it comes.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm hoping to kind of at least tune in and maybe tune into what's going on, and just from the pure fact that so many other people, it's quite nice to be doing something collectively, and hopefully, sort of giving out something positive as well.
Yes, absolutely. It's going to be a very interesting 24 hours because all sorts of people, for all sorts of reasons, are going to have a much more intense focus on things that they wouldn't otherwise focus on. So that's got to have some sort of effect, even if it's not immediately apparent in any way.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, personally, I just think it's such a gradual thing, and I think we're already in it, and it's building, and as things are breaking down, then there's more and more awareness of, okay, so what are we going to do to replace these systems that aren't working?
Yes.
And even with the euro, I noticed that the birth chart, doing the birth chart of the euro, that Pluto is going to go over its sun next year, and I think that could well be the death of the euro.
Oh wow! That's my pet subject is economics. Don't even get me started on the astrology of money, and just another entire show in itself, I think. But just to wrap up then for today, Helen, perhaps you'd like to give folks your website, tell them about any work that you have out there that you'd like to tell them about. Maybe you've got some events coming up, just whatever you want to share.
Okay, well, my website is astrologicalinsights.co.uk, and hopefully I'm just going to be able to do a blog on there, so if I've got any talks coming up, I can put them on there. And if you would like a personal reading, please do get in touch. My email address is on the website, and I'd be more than happy to give you a reading.
Excellent. Well, Helen Sewell, thank you very, very much for joining us today on legalizefreedom.com.
Okay, thank you, Greg.
Well, that's it for this time. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed today's discussion. Once again, Helen's website is astrologicalinsights.co.uk. Until next time, I'm Greg Moffat, and you've been listening to legalizefreedom.com.